Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise tonight to speak on a topic that is uncomfortable and confronting to many, but one that we must speak about more. For years, suicide has been the word we don't want to say, the topic we don't want to touch. But it is a discussion we all need to have. 8 Australians die by suicide every day. That is higher than the national daily road toll. And for every death by suicide, it is estimated that as many as 30 people attempt suicide. It is nothing short of a national crisis. Last Sunday marked World Suicide Prevention Day, a day that encourages all of us to discuss suicide in a respectful and meaningful way. World Suicide Prevention Day tackles the myth that talking about suicide is taboo, the idea being that if we speak about it, it may encourage other people to end their lives too. But current research suggests that if we do talk about suicide in a meaningful and responsible way, it can help to tackle the stigma around death by suicide and encourage more people to reach out for help. Just a few months ago, I heard from a constituent whose husband had attempted suicide. She was devastated that he hadn't reached out for help, that he hadn't confided in her before he had tried to take his own life. Tragically, this constituent was also facing financial ruin. Her husband had attempted suicide after his sports betting debts had spiralled out of control. She had no idea that he was a problem gambler, let alone the extent of his addiction. Sadly, her story is not uncommon. Research from Melbourne's Alfred Hospital suggests that for every 5 patients that report feeling suicidal, 1 of them says that it's due to their gambling addiction. Heavy financial losses are also likely to be one of the most common causes of suicides among problem gamblers. And while problem gamblers often have comorbidities including substance abuse problems and other mental health issues, debt has been identified as the factor most likely to push them to breaking point. In my first speech in this place nearly a year ago, I spoke of my dismay at the slow progress of reform to this nation's gambling sector and the very real and confronting impacts this has had on hundreds and thousands of Australians. I spoke of those who had lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings and their relationships because of their gambling addictions. I also spoke of those who ended their lives because they could not keep chasing their losses. It is clear that we, as policymakers and legislators, are failing those who so desperately need protection from this insidious and predatory industry. Last week, Commonwealth, state and territory gambling ministers met to discuss reforms to make online betting safer for consumers. Among the measures agreed to include new limits on inducements to open accounts, as well as in-principle agreement for the introduction of a register by December 2018 to allow people to self-exclude from all online gambling websites. Consumers will also be able to access regular activity statements to allow them to monitor their online gambling spend. While these are welcome measures, it should not take a year for them to be introduced. The Commonwealth and state governments must work together to introduce these reforms as a matter of urgency. But sadly, past experience has taught me that I shouldn't hold my breath for that. The pace and reach of gambling reform in Australia continues to be a sad reflection on the lack of political gumption by our major parties. Ultimately, we must remember why we need reform. We must put the health of Australians ahead of the wealth of this insidious industry. I really want to end tonight on this important note. There is always help available. Organisations such as Financial Counselling Australia can and do provide assistance to those who are struggling with debt. In my home state of South Australia, Pokies Anonymous continues to provide fantastic support to those suffering from poker machine addiction. The National Problem Gambling Helpline is also available to call or provide help online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Lifeline is another that operates around the clock to provide crisis support and suicide prevention services to those at risk. If you or someone you know are feeling vulnerable, I urge you, please, to reach out to these or many of the other organisations that are available to help. You do not have to go through this alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.